Welcome everyone to the session Low Carbon Hydrogen, Opportunities for Developing Countries. We will be holding a rapid-fire panel discussion on the opportunities that low carbon hydrogen brings to developing countries in the face of growing demand and progress towards NDC goals. Developing countries have significant blue and green hydrogen potential and therefore could use expected global demand to develop their hydrogen industry for export and domestic use, leapfrogging, when possible, natural gas. However, global hydrogen projects announced thus far have overwhelmingly left out developing countries. Prominent speakers from the World Bank, the government, private sector and academia will share their views on hydrogen sector's expansion, outlook for the development of an international hydrogen market, and the opportunities and challenges hydrogen poses to future producers and consumers. I will act as your moderator and timekeeper. If you have questions for the Q&A session at the end of this session, please post them in the chat box. We will start the discussion with Demetrios Papathanasiou, who is the Global Director for the Energy and Extractives Global Practice of the World Bank. Over to you, Demetrios.
Thank you very much, Lex, and welcome to everyone. Good evening for those of you who are connecting from the Far East. Good afternoon, colleagues in Europe, and good day and good afternoon here in the United States. Let me start by saying that, first of all, it's an honor to be at this I4C panel discussion and talk about the opportunities and the challenges we're facing on the hydrogen front. And clearly the backdrop and the context in which we're looking at hydrogen today is related to climate change. But I would argue that especially in the developing world, fossil fuels are not maybe as important as the carbon emissions right now. But we also have the possibility of hydrogen abating local pollution, which especially in many of the cities and the countries where we work in, local pollution from fossil fuels is a real problem. Now, going back to the broader international agenda, we know that energy production and use is about produces three quarters of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So if we can change the energy systems, then we win the war on climate change problems. Now, clearly, and if you look at any scenarios, it is impossible to go to net zero without having hydrogen playing a significant role by the mid of the century. And what is, I think, fascinating is that most of the projections and the activities that we see in the European Union, in Japan for some time now, in China, and definitely also on the West Coast here in the United States, are much more intense and much more serious when it comes to hydrogen more broadly and to clean energy in general. Now, the question is, the potential is there, and how can we quickly accelerate, and why we should try and quickly accelerate the development of low carbon hydrogen in our client countries. And I think the main reason is that a lot of them are lacking the infrastructure today, the large energy infrastructure that it is so associated with fossil fuels, especially around Africa. So they indeed have the possibility to leapfrog into clean energy systems, both with solar and wind. And hydrogen can play a clear role on storage and can very rapidly change transportation systems. I think this is the real potential for hydrogen. We are also finding out that when we look at remote, isolated electrification challenges, of which we have plenty in Africa, we still have about 800 million people without access to electricity. We do see that about a third of that population can be served much better with off-grid or small grid solutions. And the economics of hydrogen, even today, are much more competitive with diesel. So I think this is an area that is of particular interest to the World Bank. There are some very few pilots around the world demonstrating that. And we have to look into ways that we can do all of that faster. There's much more I would like to say, but let me stop here for now, Lex, and I'm sure we can go into details as we move on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Demetrios. You mentioned the point that it's impossible to go to net zero without hydrogen, and you stress the importance of infrastructure. Our next speaker is Daryl Wilson, the CEO of the Hydrogen Council. We're delighted to have you with us today, Daryl, and over to you. And Rio, please bring up the slides.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's good to be with you, and very happy to share on this panel with this very important opportunity for developing countries. This topic will indeed shift the balance of power and energy around the world. And many of our developing countries have a natural endowment of renewable energy resources that have not been mobilized and realized to the degree that they can be. And hydrogen is a key part of realizing that opportunity. I'm speaking to you as the Executive Director of the Hydrogen Council. We have more than 100 industrial members who work indeed around the world in many developing countries as well to deliver all kinds of industrial products and commodities. And they share the vision that hydrogen energy will be a critical transformative vector in the coming years. And in fact, even today, it already is to a greater degree than perhaps you realize. Around the world, we're seeing strong leadership with the development of national strategies that have targets and funding. Today in the lead are France, Germany, the European Union, China, Korea, and Japan, as already mentioned. And this kind of leadership can be realized anywhere. It's a matter of collaboration and looking at the natural endowment of resources available in any region of the world, and then realizing what hydrogen can do as a complement to the unfolding of industrial economy and energy. And so I'll come back to this point at the end, but I think it's important that we realize from the outset that there's no immediate impediment to taking the same trip that many other countries have already done. The funding announced in other countries around the world is substantial. This, of course, reflects the means in those countries. But I think in partnership and collaboration, realizing the opportunities and assets of any country at all, opportunities can be opened up for the economy and for business and for growth. And so it's not just the richly endowed countries with money, frankly, that are moving ahead with this strategy. It's more even the countries that are richly endowed with the resources of renewable energy. Presently, the Hydrogen Council is tracking more than 228 projects, and already, as mentioned, many of those projects are in Europe and Asia, but you can see elsewhere in the world, there is also progress and note, particularly Australia. I think this underlines my point that it's endowment of renewable energy resources that actually can make the hydrogen story take root and get started in a very good way. We're seeing similarly Chile very active in this area, recognizing the vast resources of wind and solar energy in Chile, as well as hydro. The total value of the projects announced to date exceeds 300 billion. And out of that 300 billion, we would regard about 80 billion as being mature in the sense that it's post-investment decision or into active engineering planning. This is a very dramatic scale up from what we would have seen 2-3 years ago. It is complemented, yes, indeed, by public investments, 700 billion US dollars of public investment out of the total 340, but 80% is private. And I think within developing nations, as various parts of the industry are active, you will find your hydrogen story adjacent to the industrial activity within your region, as well as renewable energy generation. We use this chart to simply depict those applications which are most competitive and ready to go when it comes to a business case for hydrogen. Moving to the right, those hydrogen applications which are more competitive compared to conventional options. And I'm very glad our first speaker mentioned diesel, which is prevalent as an energy source. This is one of the conventional energy sources that hydrogen will indeed displace relatively soon. And then working from the bottom to the top of the slide, those applications which are the most competitive, where hydrogen is the most competitive low carbon solution. So I show you this background before I clutter the slide with many applications. There are more than 35 applications here for hydrogen. And I think this is a tool that's helpful that the Hydrogen Council prepared a couple of years ago, illustrating those applications which may have a good fit for your particular region. Of course, the ones that we want to look at first are in the top right-hand side of the slide, involving ammonia fertilizer production, refinery operations, steel manufacturing, and a wide array of transportation applications. We expect that hydrogen output will grow by almost 10 times in the coming years to 2050, as hydrogen plays a very major role in decarbonization of a whole array of applications in our energy systems. And you can find more details on the Hydrogen Council website around the background of this report. Blue hydrogen is hydrogen derived from fossil fuel sources where the carbon emissions are captured and stored, and green hydrogen is generated from renewable energy, wind, solar, hydro, etc. The cost of hydrogen will come down most rapidly in those regions that already have a rich endowment of renewable energy resources. And this is where you see on the right-hand side, there is an unequal dispersion of the cost of hydrogen when it comes to renewable energy resources. And those countries like Chile, for example, that have very strong renewable energy resource development will be able to deliver hydrogen to their own applications in the mining industry and other areas where they're already engaged, as well as open the prospect for energy export in the form of hydrogen. Chile has the capacity to produce 70 times more energy than the nation itself can consume. And so new opportunities for energy export are actually triggered by hydrogen generated from renewables as well. So wrapping up, your country does have a hydrogen story. The question is, have you found it yet? It's there. And hydrogen is bigger and closer than you might think. A matter of looking a little more closely at some of this material I've shared today will open up some opportunity and possibilities for you, I'm sure. And indeed, hydrogen opens up possibilities and opportunities to localize power and energy. And I mean that in two senses, in the sense of electrons and electricity and renewable energy, but also influence in the world and the mobilization of the people and the competencies in your economy, the energy of the people can be realized through the hydrogen story. The most important starting point is collaboration. And that means collaboration between sectors and between actors, both within your country and outside of your country. I know many of the members of the Hydrogen Council are more than happy to work with countries around the world to realize the vision and the possibility of hydrogen, because indeed it finds itself in places that are not obvious or not anticipated initially. And what you need is a national strategy where there's a consensus effort to capitalize on this opportunity. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Daryl. You show that any country can take a leadership role and all it takes is collaboration. Our next speaker is Yeonwoo Choi, Director at the New Energy Division of the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy of South Korea. It is midnight in Korea right now, so Director Choi can't be with us in person, but he has kindly recorded a video message for us. So Rio, if you would please start the video.
안녕하십니까. 대한민국 산업통상자원부 신에너지산업과장 최현우입니다. 수소경제에 대해 많은 관심을 주시는 월드뱅크 그룹 및 귀빈 여러분께 감사드리며 오늘 대한민국 수소경제 정책을 소개할 수 있게 되어 매우 기쁘게 생각합니다. 오늘의 발표 순서에 대해 말씀드리겠습니다. 우선 수소경제 활성화를 위한 한국 정부 정책에 대해 간략히 설명드리겠습니다. 그리고 해외 청정 수소 도입 방안을 비롯한 정부의 향후 추진 계획에 대해 설명드리겠습니다. 먼저 한국 정부가 추진 중인 수소경제 활성화 정책을 설명드리겠습니다. 정부는 지난 2019년 1월 세계 최고 수준의 수소경제 선도국가로의 도약이라는 비전 하에 수소경제 활성화 로드맵을 발표하였습니다. 수소경제 로드맵에서는 글로벌 수소경제를 이끌기 위한 수소산업 전 주기의 발전 전략 및 목표를 제시하였습니다. 로드맵에 따라 우리나라는 2018년 수소경제 준비기를 시작으로 22년 확산기를 거쳐 40년에는 선도국가로 도약하겠다는 내용이 포함되었습니다. 먼저 로드맵의 주요 내용에 대해 설명드리겠습니다. 수소차 및 연료전지 시장 세계 점유율 1위 달성을 목표로 로드맵은 수소 활용 산업의 시장 창출에 방점을 찍었습니다. 이에 따라 2018년 약 1,800대인 수소차 시장 규모를 22년 6만 7천 대, 2040년에는 290만 대로 보급을 늘려나갈 계획입니다. 그리고 이에 맞춰 수소 충전소를 22년 310개소, 2040년에는 1200개소까지 늘릴 예정입니다. 발전용 연료전지는 설치 규모를 2018년 307MW에서 22년 1.5GW 수준으로 확대할 예정이고 현재 약 600MW 수준으로 운영 중입니다. 향후 연료전지 대량 생산을 통해 설치비와 발전 단가를 대폭 절감하여 25년경에는 중소형 가스터빈 수준까지 인하함으로써 40년에는 8GW 이상으로 확대할 계획입니다. 로드맵 발표 이후 민간의 노력을 통해 가시적인 성과가 나타나고 있습니다. 우선 정부는 수소경제 활성화 로드맵 발표 이후 표준, 안전, 인프라 등 6개 분야별 세부 대책을 수립하였습니다. 그 결과 수소차 보급량은 현재 13,000대 수준으로 늘었고 20년 말에는 600MW 이상의 연료전지 발전 규모를 기록하는 등 활용 분야를 중심으로 유의미한 성과를 거두었습니다. 또한 수소법을 제정 시행하여 제도적 기반을 마련함과 동시에 수소 분야의 투자 불확실성을 줄여 민간 기업이 선제적이고 적극적인 투자를 유도할 수 있게 되었습니다. 우리나라 수소법은 작년 2월 제정되었고 올해 2월 발효되었습니다. 다만 안전 관련 규정은 내년 2월 발효될 예정입니다. 수소법은 수소경제위원회 전담기관 지정 등 수소경제를 위한 추진 체계를 담고 있습니다. 또한 전문기업 육성, 특화단지 조성 등 수소경제 육성 지원을 위한 법적 기반을 확보하였고 수전해 등 저압수소시설 관련 안전관리 규정을 신설하였으며 안전을 바탕으로 수소경제를 이행할 수 있게 되었습니다. 수소법 제정을 통해 우리나라는 수소경제를 향한 정책의 지속성을 확보할 수 있게 되었습니다. 다음으로 정부의 향후 추진 계획을 말씀드리겠습니다. 대한민국 정부와 기업은 해외와의 수소 교육을 탄소 중립 이행의 가장 중요한 요소로 고려하고 있습니다. 탄소 중립을 실현할 수 있는 재생에너지 및 CCUS 기술은 그 여건이 국가마다 상이하기 때문에 청정 에너지 수요와 공급의 균형을 개별 국가 단위로 달성하기에는 한계가 있습니다. 이에 따라 에너지 캐리어인 수소의 교육을 통해 글로벌 탄소 중립에 기여할 필요가 있습니다. 아쉽게도 현재 우리나라에선 부생수소와 수출수소의 비중이 100%에 가깝습니다. 그리고 우리나라보다 해외의 청정수소 개발 환경이 상대적으로 우위에 있습니다. 따라서 해외의 자연 환경을 통해 생산한 청정수소를 국내에 도입하는 글로벌 공급체계를 적극 구축 중입니다. 이를 위해 지난 6월 30여 개의 기업, 기관이 참여하는 청정수소 해외사업단이 출범하였습니다. 청정수소 해외사업단은 해외의 저렴한 청정수소를 2030년부터 도입하기 위해 3단계에 걸쳐 사업을 추진할 것입니다. 우선 첫 단계로 금년까지 기초타당성 조사를 추진할 것입니다. 현재 해외 수소 도입에 관심이 있는 기업들의 수요를 적극 반영하여 전략을 마련하고 있습니다. 2단계로 각 공급망 후보별로 4에서 5년간 사업기회 실증을 추진할 계획입니다. 마지막으로 사업화 단계에서는 기업 주도로 대규모 실증 후 해외의 저렴한 청정수소를 본격적으로 도입할 것입니다. 이를 통해 2040년에 15개, 2050년에 50개의 안정적인 해외 청정수소 공급망이 구축될 예정입니다. 아울러 글로벌 공급망 이외에 국내 수소경제 이행 계획을 탄소 중립 기조에 맞춰 개편할 예정입니다. 2019년도 로드맵 발표 이후 국회와 민간 분야에서 로드맵에 대한 보완 요청이 제기되었습니다. 이러한 요청을 담아 금년 내 수소경제 로드맵 2.0을 수립할 계획입니다. 먼저 수소 생산 분야에서 청정수소 포트폴리오를 어떻게 가져갈지에 대한 고민이 필요합니다. 이에 수전의 용량을 점차 확대하여 궁극적으로 100MW에 달하는 대규모 수전의 시스템 개발을 포함하여 국내 그린, 블루 수소 개발 및 해외 청정수소 도입에 관한 계획을 수립할 예정입니다. 유탄 분야에서는 기존의 기체수소 방식을 넘어 액화수소, 배관 등 다양한 수소 유통수단의 최적 배치 전략도 고민해 나갈 예정입니다. 특히 민간의 대규모 액화수소 플랜트 건설에 대응하여 대도시, 대규모 유통에 적합한 액화수소 보급 계획을 수립할 것입니다. 활용 분야에서도 기존의 수소차, 발전용 연료전지 중심의 활용 생태계를 더욱 확장해 나갈 것입니다. 철강, 시멘트 등 업종별 산업단지, 개별 공장별 수소 활용 확대 방안을 검토해 나갈 예정입니다. 또한 단순한 수소 활용을 넘어 청정수소 인증제 도입 및 의무 사용 확대 방안을 검토하고 상용차와 건설기계, 드론, 선박 등 수소 모빌리티의 다변화를 위한 로드맵을 마련할 것입니다. 이상 오늘의 설명을 마치겠습니다. 긴 시간 관심을 가지고 경청해 주셔서 감사합니다.
Many thanks to Director Choi for his message. He spoke to us about the ambitious plans of the government to develop a hydrogen economy and the importance of trade and developing supply chains. Our next speaker is Cohen Langi, a senior hydrogen solutions developer for ENGIE in South Africa. Over to you, Cohen, and please load your own slides.
Thanks, everyone, and happy to be here as part of this discussion panel. So some brief words from my side as a representative from ENGIE on the green hydrogen potential for South Africa and Brazil. So very quick on ENGIE for those who are not aware, ENGIE is one of the bigger utility players, really focused today on decarbonization, first of our own assets, but also to support our industrial clients and governments to support them reaching net zero as well. And we recently announced, I think it was last week, one key target for hydrogen is to reach 4 gigawatts of installed capacity by 2030. So what is our vision in general on hydrogen? We really believe that hydrogen as an energy vector will enable us to decarbonize globally. We will be able to move green energy from countries where we have a surplus to countries where we have a deficit. However, for this to occur, we first need to reach a certain scale, and this is where we really need to start with hydrogen projects in those regions where we have competitive renewables, while at the same time we need to focus on segments, as explained before by Daryl, where it could make competitive sense as soon as possible. ENGIE has already been working on several projects. Here you have some of them. Some large-scale projects around ammonia, some projects around the mining sector, mobility, other chemicals, and also a lot of R&D projects that have been done already back like 10 years ago. For example, blending hydrogen within the gas network, amongst others. So looking again at the countries, what is the renewable potential? I don't have to state the obvious, but Brazil and South Africa, from a solar perspective, they have abundant resources. From wind perspective as well, not to mention CSP or hydro as well. This has been summarized by the IEA in one of their reports, The Future of Hydrogen. And you can see here with the color code, the two countries which are within a range that we could consider as a competitive range for green hydrogen. Big question, I think, for today is where to start transition, right? So we could have many different applications, but again, linking back to the slide shown previously from the Hydrogen Council, I've made here, based on the final energy consumption, a separation between all the different ones and the two key ones, which I would like to raise today, which is road transport and everything related to minerals and metals or the mining sector in general. And you can see that actually for both countries, both South Africa and Brazil, more than 40% of the energy is going to these sectors. So coming back to our vision approach from the beginning, I believe for both South Africa and Brazil, a good place to start is the mining sector. And there's different applications that we could do. Many of these mining companies, they have publicly committed to reaching certain goals, right? And many of them want to be net zero by 2050. Some of them even by 2030, which is less than 10 years from now. So renewables are helping them. But if they want to decarbonize heavy duty mining trucks, railroads, even shipping the minerals from one country to the other, they really need to find solutions. And this is where hydrogen in many of its forms can help us achieve this. The other one is linked to mobility. We have seen that road transport for both countries is a key emitter today. And this is where one of the graphs from a previous study from the Hydrogen Council shows us, depending on the weight of the vehicle, depending on how much you use it every day, it makes a lot of sense to start using hydrogen as well. And it even becomes competitive against diesel on a very short term. So we have already started working on this from our side. We're working with partners, so the mining trucks, we're working today with Anglo American in South Africa. We're also looking at other projects, for example, in Chile and Brazil that are not yet public. And at the same moment, we're also leveraging on the infrastructure that we will have in these countries to set up hydrogen valleys where we can then promote heavy duty mobility, which will be one of the key drivers as well. So Brazil coming soon, working on this one. I think in general, what is important is that we as early movers or early adopters, we are really activating this virtuous circle. So by creating hydrogen applications, we will need more renewables. And by having more renewables, each time the renewables will become more competitive. And this really keeps on going and scaling up. Today, what we are seeing from the hydrogen, and there's a lot of hype around it, but we're really seeing the tip of the iceberg today, right? If you look back at the total primary energy sources being used, and this is not even fully up to date, still the biggest portion is linked to fossil fuels. And this is where the Hydrogen Council, they have made an estimation of what the hydrogen economy could look like in 2050. But even then, if you look at this number here, which represents a $2.5 trillion opportunity, even then it only represents 18% of the final energy demand. So it could even grow beyond this. So what about the local hydrogen market? And again, I will focus on mobility. If we consider that road mobility in average would take up a 30% share of the energy that it's currently consuming, this is what it would represent, if my math is still correct, more or less in hydrogen consumption. So putting this in dollars, and of course I've made some estimations I reference underneath, but this represents an opportunity of $8 and $34 billion, depending if we're talking about South Africa or Brazil, for the local market, only considering road mobility. And as you know, there are many other applications that we could focus on. If we then speak about hydrogen export, then I didn't make the estimation specifically for each country. I rather give a ballpark figure in the sense that for each 100 gigawatt renewables that you could generate in these countries, you could create up till a $10 billion per year export opportunity. And just to name some examples, speaking with, let's say, the Ceará province here in Brazil, only this province, they already have potential capacity for wind and solar energy up to 800 gigawatts. So only this region represents $80 billion per year opportunity. And if we would consider the whole of Brazil and the whole of South Africa, I can assure you that this will go far beyond the $100 billion a year. So there is a big opportunity, and it's important that the stakeholders, the governments, we collaborate to make this happen. So here, really to underline this, the importance of co-creating together. Today we have a lot of hype around hydrogen. It's important for us that we reach the collaboration curve as soon as possible. and then we can come to the plateau of productivity. So as a closing, I would like to reference a sentence from Nelson Mandela: "There's no passion to be found playing small." So I really invite all of you to think big, and certainly within Brazil and South Africa, this is possible from a hydrogen perspective. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Cohen. We've heard about potential pathways to decarbonize transport and mining in South Africa and Brazil, and we've heard about big export opportunities and passion. So that's great. Our next speaker is Hatem Alatawi, a senior research analyst at CAPSARC, the King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center in Saudi Arabia. Over to you, Hatem.
Thank you, and thank you for this great opportunity. So the pursuit of low carbon hydrogen initiatives in Saudi Arabia comes from a cumulative of various events and policies that have been taking place, both on a global and a local level. Within the last decades, the Vision 2030 has led a series of measures to make the energy system more efficient, including a deployment of renewable energy, fuel sustainability, and implementation of energy efficiency measures, including reforming and domestic fuel energy sale prices. Saudi Arabia, during its G20 presidency last year, had a leading role in promoting a pragmatic approach to managing fugitive carbon emissions, namely the Circular Carbon Economy Framework. The CCE framework was endorsed by the energy ministers of the G20 countries and is seen as a holistic solution to mitigate emissions, and there is no solution to fit all. Technology agnostic approach is crucial in lowering carbon emissions and at the lowest cost. And more recently, a part of the Green Saudi Initiative and the Green Middle East Initiative, the Kingdom set a goal to reduce carbon emissions by 60%. So to highlight the efforts, the Kingdom, an extension of the linear economy, the CCE focuses on energy and carbon flows, utilizing the 4 Rs. So reduce, recycle, reuse, and remove. The contribution of the 4 Rs to mitigate carbon emissions depends on the cost of technologies, resource availability, national circumstances, and of course, the country's enabling policy. Hydrogen has been identified as a cross-cutting enabler in a circular carbon economy, given its versatility in various applications and low carbon production pathways. Hydrogen can span across the 4 Rs as shown in the figure. It can reduce carbon emissions from the supply side by replacing gray hydrogen production with blue or green production. And from the demand side, it can replace hydrocarbons in the mobility as well as in the industrial sectors, just like my colleagues have said. CO2 can also be recycled by combining it with hydrogen to create synthetic fuels such as synthetic diesel and kerosene. Captured CO2 from hydrogen production can also be reduced in other applications and enhance oil recovery alternative. It also can be removed and stored in geological storages. Saudi Arabia, moving with its diversification plan, the Saudi Vision 2030 is keen on adopting hydrogen. The Kingdom is keen to enable the circular carbon economy by producing and utilizing clean hydrogen. Last September, Saudi Aramco announced its first shipment of hydrogen from Saudi Arabia to Japan. The 40 tons of high-grade blue ammonia shipment, which is meant for use in zero carbon power generation, marks its first of its kind and worldwide. And the Saudi-Japan partnership represents by Saudi Aramco and Mitsubishi spans the whole supply chain. So it includes the capturing of associated carbon dioxide emissions and the conversion of hydrocarbons into hydrogen and into ammonia. And it also includes the ports used to ship ammonia. So why is the Kingdom pivoting from hydrocarbon production into the blue hydrogen? So Saudi Arabia has one of the largest gas reserves in the world, estimated to contain around 240 trillion cubic feet, concentrated in the eastern region part of the country. In 2019, the gas consumption in Saudi reached close to 11 billion cubic feet, and it's the 6th largest gas market in the world, which contains also the gathering facilities, natural gas processing plants, and pipelines. So the infrastructure is already there. And the size of the gas transmission line is around 1,600 kilometers, which is used to ship the gas from the east side to the west region of Saudi Arabia. So the gas consumption in Saudi Arabia between 2000 and 2019 grew at an outstanding annual average of around 5%. This is almost double the global annual average growth rate of gas in the Kingdom. The power generation sector accounts for the largest portion of that, with around 63%, followed by the industrial sector for around 30%. The strong growth in demand have been driven by population and economic growth, as seen in the Kingdom, as also caused by the low prices of gas. So in 1984, domestic gas prices were around 0.5 per MMBTU. It was revised in 1998 to 0.75, and in 2016 it was set to be $1.5 per MMBTU. Despite the rise in domestic prices, it's in the last 2 decades, it's still the lowest in the world, promoting industrial competitiveness in the kingdom. However, gas supplies are constrained by the pipeline capacity to deliver to the power producers and other industrial users. Given the concentration of the oil and gas fields, distribution pipelines, and proximity to potential CO2 storage and utilization sites, the Eastern region is ideal for blue hydrogen production. A first-order assessment of the theoretical geological CO2 storage estimates that the Middle East has a resource base that can potentially accommodate 2,500 gigatons of CO2 storage, most of which is concentrated in deep saline aquifers. A substantial majority is found in Saudi Arabia. Also, the extending refineries and chemical complexes located in the eastern region can be leveraged to convert the facilities to produce blue hydrogen. However, blue hydrogen economics are highly sensitive to gas prices. While plans are underway to increase gas supplies, production of the new farm gas are expected to be sourced from non-associated gas and unconventional gas resources, which comes with a higher price tag than associated gas. So moving on towards what would be the future, how is Saudi Arabia going to capitalize on the first mover's advantage? So Aramco's priority is to supply the kingdom with gas. Once it satisfies the kingdom requirements and in coordination with the Ministry of Energy, they will seek exploring additional gas in terms of shifting it directly to blue hydrogen rather than LNG. Recently, Aramco chief finance officer said that they are looking into skipping one step. Instead of going to LNG, Aramco would take the gas directly to hydrogen. Aramco have all the elements to make it successful. They have the scale and the experience. Not just Aramco, but also SABIC, which is one of the largest companies in Saudi Arabia. The VP of Energy and Efficiency and Carbon Management said that the Saudi unit could economically leverage the existing infrastructure for hydrogen and ammonia production with CO2 capturing. SABIC's experience is in the full supply chain, along with integrated petrochemicals facility, will play an important role in providing blue ammonia to the world. Also, internationally, Saudi Aramco have invested in opportunities within Japan, Korea, and so on. And recently, within Japan, there was an MOU signed with Saudi Aramco to investigate potential opportunities for establishing a blue hydrogen and blue ammonia supply chain. Japan's formulated carbon strategy neutral by 2050 in December, which aims to produce 3 million megatons per year of hydrogen, and by 2050, 200 million. It accelerates the development of the international supply chains network, as well as the cumulative demand in various sectors. Saudi Arabia aims to be a steady supply of that blue hydrogen. Also recently, Saudi Aramco has confirmed its MOU with Hyundai Heavy Industry in Korea. The MOU is the agreement with two parties are seeking to an opportunity to find a cooperation model for the eco-friendly hydrogen and ammonia production, including joint research and development within Qatar. With that, I hope I shed some light on what Saudi Arabia aims to pivot to, why is it doing that, and how it could capitalize on it. And also, the kingdom is also keen on green hydrogen. There has been some investments in NEOM, the city north of West, which is which has very high solar potentials and also very high renewable potentials. Back to you, Lex.
Thank you for your contribution, Hatem. It's very interesting to hear that Aramco plans to skip LNG export and go directly to hydrogen. Ladies and gentlemen, the final minutes of the session are dedicated to Q&A. So let me kick off by directing a question to Demetrios. What new insights have you heard today, Demetrios, on the opportunities for developing countries to transition into a low carbon hydrogen economy? And what needs to happen to ensure these countries don't miss out on the opportunities?
Thank you, Lex. I don't think there's anything particular new, but the new item, I think, is the speed and the tendency to accelerate these developments. I think what we have found out in the energy sector, especially when it comes to new technologies, is that there clearly are learning curves, and that costs and development can move very, very rapidly once you go through the first stages. And I think the kind of projects, I mean, the level of scale and planning that goes on in South Korea. If you see it the way that Saudi Arabia is thinking about how to do things in the Gulf, the opportunities that Angie is working on in South Africa and in Brazil, I think they all indicate that this is truly a new era when it comes to hydrogen. And I think this is really fascinating. And what we see also in the World Bank is that increasingly we hear the ministers of energy, the line ministers, asking us questions about what about hydrogen, what is it that we can do to make sure that they can move as fast as possible in that space. And I think we all have to do a lot of additional work to improve our understanding of the constraints, the level of costs today, and the abilities of technologies to deliver things today. I've been looking at the chat and the questions that are coming up in the chat. There's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of confusion still about what hydrogen is about, how big a business it is already, and how common it is as a fuel, not just to send rockets to space, but on much more earthy applications. And I agree with Daryl that if you look at the potential for renewables, and you know, just the other day we got the results from one of the auctions we did together with our colleagues from the IFC in Uzbekistan, and the winning bidder for about 500 megawatts had a bid price of an average of about 1.8 cents per kilowatt hour. That is a truly low price, and it will only go further down. I think since electricity is a key factor, especially to the green hydrogen, I think that the costs of producing hydrogen have the potential to come down very, very rapidly, which in turn will create additional pressure for the hydrocarbon industry to capture the CO2 and store it and remain competitive as well. And I think this is all very good news for the prospects of the world to move faster towards a clean energy environment. I think that's the main insight that I see. I see a lot of momentum and optimism about how hydrogen can contribute in an energy mix that deals with the challenge of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Demetrios. I think we have time for another question. One participant in the audience remarked that projects in the developing world seem to be limited to South Africa and Latin America. And he asked, are there any hydrogen stories in West Africa, for example? Goran, let me turn to you as a practitioner in the field, working from Africa. What's your experience? What sort of barriers do you see? What needs to happen to broaden the base of countries where this is taking off right now?
Yeah, thanks, Lex, for the question. I think really what you need at one side, of course, you need competitive renewables. So I think there's a lot of countries besides South Africa and Latin America where this is happening. Just to name some, for example, in Canada, you have great hydro resources. Even in North Africa, you have very good solar resources as well. The other element that you need is you need some kind of a framework which is provided by the government for you to be able to do such projects. This can go from policy making to actually having a real financial support. And then maybe the third ingredient is really you have to find a local anchor customer, which is the ideal scenario, because if not, you only have to work towards an export scenario, which today, even if there is concrete targets, today it's still more on the mid long term. So I would recommend, if you have these three ingredients, you can develop a hydrogen project.
Thanks, Goran. Hatem, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is a country that's been very dependent on fossil fuels. What does the hydrogen opportunity mean for the country, and how do you think the country will develop?
To be honest, I think the kingdom in 2016, when the Vision 2030 was set, the target was clear. it was to diversify the economy and move into a framework that supports the growth of the kingdom. And hydrogen ticks all the elements, ticks boxes of all the elements. It's clean, it's circular, and the kingdom has the potential to be a very large exporter. So it also provides a potential source of revenue for the kingdom. So it could, in the sense, it could substitute oil for the future. And I think the kingdom has been very keen on addressing this opportunity. So if you looked at the past year, there has been a couple of announcements that targeted hydrogen specifically. And in last April, I think the kingdom recorded the lowest PV solar project with, I believe it's around $0.01 per kilowatt hour. So in the sense of the kingdom has very high potential in renewables, very low cost renewables that could, in the sense, feed the green hydrogen potential as well. So with that, NEOM, for example, could be an exporter. Aramco in the East Coast could be an exporter for hydrogen. And since the routes are already there to supply either Europe or Korea, it makes total sense for the kingdom to go in that direction.
Thank you very much. So thanks very much for that response, Hatem. And ladies and gentlemen, our time is up. Daryl has kindly responded to many of the infrastructure-related questions in the chat box. Thanks for that, Daryl. I thank you for participating in this session. I hope that it has been interesting to you, and a great thank you to all of our speakers, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.